How's it going, everyone? Mufaria. Welcome to Heliopolis Radio. Thank you all for tuning in. I decided to mix it up a little bit. I decided to record outdoors, so if you hear some birds chirping or any weird shit happening, I thought I'd just try a different change in environment and give this a go. There may be an issue with the sound quality and, because sound's kind of lost and everything, but I hope you guys can at least interpret what I'm saying. And we're back at it again with another personal vlog I'm going to be continuing on the addiction topic. And as you know, these personal vlogs, these aren't scripted, so I just kind of go into my head and ramble on. And so I saw the last video I did on economics had 1 view, so clearly I know fuck all about economics and people don't want to listen. So we're gonna maybe not do that for a while till we get some more concrete information to maybe stimulate the mind. So we're working on it. But I remember in the last addiction podcast, just a quick summary, I talked about the chakra system, the energy centers in our body, and the energy centers associated with addiction, particularly the sacral chakra. It's the color orange. You probably see it in a lot of new age, discussions and topics. It's colored orange. And so, it has to do with creativity, expression, desire, personal fulfillment, and desire. And so, it's also where we fall into things like fantasies, also addiction, illusions, and all sorts of things. But the more important aspect of that chakra in particular is its association with our childhood, and more importantly is our parental dynamic. And I don't want to sound all, I don't want to say progressive with this talk, but our connection to masculine and feminine energies within ourselves, so our personal balance. And so, part of what I have been, what I did what I'm still doing in order to, prevent relapses, which can inevitably happen, nothing's guaranteed, but what I'm doing to try and mitigate it is really try actually explore different dimensions of ourselves. Obviously, traditional therapy prescribes, we have the hard shit, right? You gotta grind it out, you gotta will it through, you gotta fight the temptation, and you gotta develop a personal amount of willpower. And I agree with that. It's actually very important. That's funny enough, because the chakra is about balancing. It's about masculine and feminine. And the masculine way, it's very important and you don't have to be specifically a man to understand this, but it's about cultivating that personal strength and strengthening your own personal energies to not be swayed by things of external matters per se. In this case, with porn addiction, it's just the temptation and the desire to indulge in sexual act or witnessing people perform the sexual act in an inappropriate way. And I say that liberally because it's all subjective. We think what you view and deem as appropriate and inappropriate all depends on the state of your mind. But ultimately, I deem something destructive when it destroys your personal psyche and it prevents you from engaging life as conducively and as harmoniously as possible. Personal opinion. But coming back to it, within our sacral chakra, it's actually located in between 2 interesting points. Because if you look at our root chakra, which is just below it, which has to do with our primal, it's associated with our survival response, with our family structure, more specifically our bloodline, our connection to Earth, our drive to, thrive as a human being, species-wise, as well as ancestral-wise, depending on your lineage and your background and everything like that. I'm not going to go into it. And just above it, you have your solar plexus chakra, which is where predominantly our ego, at least the most dense part of our ego, is kind of manifest, it's kind of where our personal power lies, how we want to be seen. And so the reason why I talk about this is because everything is connected, right? You can't just isolate something and ignore the rest. And so you look at it like this: between your need for personal power and personal fulfillment, whatever the ideal image is that you see yourself or you want people to view as, and beneath that, your ultimate desire to survive and thrive as a human being, through overcoming the forces of nature and ultimately preserving your lineage and your survival, species-wise. In between that, you have the sacral chakra, which is so fundamental, right? And so with addiction, it's actually lodged in between two fundamental life processes which are really important for us. Our need to survive and to preserve ourselves and to ensure our offspring continue whatever nonsense we leave behind. And above and beyond, we live in a society that we're ultimately seen, and some of us seek to be seen, and so we have to manage that appropriately. And so why it's so difficult to handle things like porn addiction is because it's ultimately interlinked between everything, right? Sex is associated with our survival, and more specifically in the society that we live in, where it's predominantly now kind of like a sex culture, right? That's for a multitude of reasons. It could be religious dogmas that have, essentially prevented people from understanding, the sexual experience within themselves. And I say this soberly, not like, go out and do stupid shit and whatever, because that's what happens, with us. We get exposed to an idea and then we over-exaggerate it in our minds, and once it gets to our minds, we're fucked. Which is also what happens with porn, which is why I'm talking about this. So it's hard to tackle and handle something that is so intimately associated with our physiology and our experience as people. And so, why it's even more difficult to tackle is because of the memory that's associated with it. So within these realms of energetic experience, memory lodges itself into. And so, I don't know, maybe the psychology has shifted a bit more. We live in a more conscious, I guess I want to say conscious world. But for most of us growing up, particularly those of us in like 96 and below, sex was seen as it's almost a symbol of power, right? And a large part of our confidence and our self-belief and our personal power was derived from our sexual interactions. And so, in order to feel societally fit as a man or woman, you had to have a certain sexual dynamic or, capability to yourself. And so for those of us that maybe, again, life gives us all different abilities and facets, not all of us are hot conventionally or sexy conventionally, and that's just what it is. Porn is like that little alternative that can at least send you into that sexual realm or dimension without having the actual experience of it, without actualizing it. So, there are two things in the mind and things that are actualized. Things in the mind are things that we literally concoct up to believe, even though they may not be true. And things that are actualized and experienced are things that we ultimately go through, they happen. And so, apologies if there's a bit of a glare, the sun just popped up. Maybe I'm spitting woke bars, kidding. But essentially, that memory is very powerful, and it plays out throughout our life. We get better at handling it as we grow older, because as we grow older, we move away from our base desires and we start to move to our mind, where we start to take peace less in the external things and more in the internal things, how we go about it. But for the most part, when we're young, particularly our teens, our 20s and our 30s, our sex drive is particularly powerful at that point in time. The creative potency within us, and we're all different, we all have different, desires and things. But for the most part, in general, that period is really sex intensive. And so when addiction lodges itself into you, it's harder to get it out because you're experiencing it, type thing. And so it's a lot of effort. And so, we have all these prescriptions that we say, we do this in the mind and we do this, and these are very important things, but you got to go through the experience. You got to understand the experiential aspect of you. And that's what I did with myself. You have to investigate the memory, and you have to literally investigate your childhood and your upbringing. And you got to go through it, and you got to be honest with yourself with it. And so there are kind of 4 pillars that I kind of realized were fundamental, and I'm not the only one who's realized them. In actual fact, people have already kind of said the same thing. I'm just relaying it in my own silly way. Our parental dynamic is extremely important to us as people subconsciously, more than we ever know. Because when we're kids, we take on cues in ways that we're not necessarily aware, but we're still registering it. So for instance, some of us who lack a strong connection to our father figure, per se, and everyone's circumstances is different, but if there wasn't a father figure that was within the home, or if there was a father figure who was in the home who was extremely authoritative and dictatorial, that stuff, it affects you, your human experience, because you're being molded by things around you. That's ultimately the truth. Until you grow older, where you can filter out what you let affect you and what you don't. As a kid, everything affects you, and it affects you however it affects you, And so, or for instance, if your mother wasn't there, or if she was negligent to you, or if she was, if there was favoritism, whatever the family dynamic, that stuff becomes something that actually lodges itself into us as memory. And because us humans, our natural inclination is to correct and rectify. Yes, we self-correct. We're not purely destructive, but we want to fix things within ourselves to be optimally functional, to survive and everything. And I'm not going to get into that. We seek to fix those things through whatever we do in our lives. So all our sexual inclinations, our desires and our fantasies, sometimes we don't realize they don't just stem from a place of madness or you're fucked up, or that could be true. I mean, you could have issues, which is okay. It is what it is, but you could also have serious subconscious themes that are playing in behind the scenes that you're not fully aware of. And so a lot of our, again, and this is not for everyone, but particularly if you do struggle with things like, you have to look at the nature of the porn that you watch, or the nature of the sexual, whatever, intimacies or affairs that you watch, and you have to really evaluate yourself and see, okay, growing up, what happened? I mean, did I come from a religiously dogmatic family where things were very taboo? It was either this and that, you didn't talk about anything, and ultimately, whatever, that may be affecting me. That may be why I need to talk to 10 different people at once. That may be why I need to go and watch X amount of porn, this type of porn, because subconsciously, yes, this addiction is a separate issue on its own, but what's fueling this addiction is a complete unawareness of the internal dialogue that's actually surfacing within me. And more importantly, is the connectedness between everything, because it's a holistic way of looking at it. You look at your survival, like, what I mean? Everyone knows that, our species, the only thing that's, common amongst every species is we live and we die. And so is not only are my addictions being fueled by my own childhood upbringing, but my circumstances one of survival, in terms of poverty, in terms of hardship. Do you come from a background where resources were scarce to come by, where children are seen as a commodity, in order to protect the family livelihood? You had X amount of siblings where you didn't even fucking matter. Not saying that's like everything, but that's the human experience. And then you also need to evaluate your ego, apologies, man, these trees. Anyway, it is what it is. The more important one, which is where we really struggle with, is personal power and our image and how we're seen. Our society has become in such a way that we become disillusioned in what actually makes us valuable to society. You go on Instagram, you see someone with high-level sex appeal. They have all the following, they have all these things. And yes, we may claim to be mature, but everyone knows that we all go through a bit of envy, we all go through a bit of jealousy, we all go through a bit of insecurity. And we have to somehow find a way to substitute that insecurity. And, it requires honest dialogue. I mean, they're very, very gifted people with very astute minds and strong hearts. And, none of this shit matters. They just get through with it and it doesn't matter. But a lot of us, a majority of people in society go through these subconscious issues, at least what I've seen. And it's because you don't ask yourself these internal questions. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to ramble on too long. I try to keep it 15 minutes, but that's just the gist of it. What I would suggest or extend is that you actually just evaluate your own internal dialogue when you have time, obviously, if it's worth it, if it's not. But it'll be interesting. You actually break yourself down and you look at your childhood, you look at whatever your upbringing was, you look at the dynamic, and you also look at your own ego. You look at where you stand in society, how you feel about yourself, how valuable, what you deem makes you valuable and what doesn't. And, particularly if you have any, addiction of any sort, how that addiction fits into that whole picture. And ultimately, in the next one, they're actually going to go deeper into it. Like it's not just about those three chakras. It's actually a deeper thing, but fundamentally, those are the things that you look for. And I think if you can get a better sense of that when you're doing something like recovery, or you're trying to, mitigate yourself from relapsing, you have a better idea where to work on and what key areas and weaknesses that you have. Specifically, the parental dynamic is a very important one for us. And some people it's different. Some people have, everyone's circumstance is different. Some people have no connection to their parents at all. They didn't ever meet. Life happens like that. But again, whatever the caretaker, or whoever was in the caretaker role for you, that energy translates into the same thing. The roles still remain the same, even though circumstances can be varied. So I leave it at that, and apologies for the nature doing its thing, but I felt it would be cool to do something different. And so peace and blessings to people. Thank you.